Thank you everybody for joining. We're excited to have Krista here, and also I am excited to be hosting this session. Um, the way we'll run this is I'll do a quick introduction of myself, and then Krista will do some introduction of herself, and then we'll dive in. We'll just have some conversation. And then from there, we will, just going into some questions. We may, like I mentioned earlier, we may not be able to get to all of the questions, but hopefully Krista will be able to share some contact information with us that, those of us that may want to talk to her, consult with her personally after this session, will be able to reach out to her or reach out to our team to facilitate those connections. So thank you very much, Krista.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Sweet. Hi, everybody. I'm Paul. I am the CEO and founder of Pay for Me. I love having conversations that can help international students and really anybody looking to relocate abroad and trying to get some clarity in terms of how to better prepare themselves for their visas, especially with countries that require you to do a lot of paperwork or require an in-person interview, like the United States specifically that we're talking about today. So I started Pay for Me based off of my own personal experience. In 2014, there about a decade ago, I came to the US as an international student, super excited. But I had challenges with getting my tuition and school fees paid on time due to challenges with the banking system. But then I later on, I figured it out. But then later on, started working as an international student advisor, was helping students from over 120 countries come to the US for higher ed. And I was exposed to a lot of the challenges that international students face, including, visa denials, getting money to the school, every other thing they need to do to be able to, just come to the US, paying their CVs, all of that stuff. So started Pay for Me really to help solve some of these problems, and excited that we getting the opportunity to be, you know, um, connecting with a professional here, an expert, if you will, to help guide us with some of the issues that people face here. So, Krista, I'll turn the time over to you to do some introduction, and then we'll kick in. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Christa Byker. I'm a former U.S. visa officer. I was with the State Department for 5 years and did thousands and thousands of US visa applications and many, many student visas. So I'm happy to help you guys figure out what you're really going through here. One of the things that's very difficult about the US visa process is that, and something that I was very frustrated with when I worked as a visa officer, is that they're not the embassy or the consulate, they're not very honest about what the process really takes and what you need to present and how you need to present to get to that issuance. And for African students, this is especially true. So after leaving the State Department, my mission now is educational, to really help people understand what they are getting into and how they need to present their case to have the best chance at issuance. All right, so the US student visa obviously is for people who want to study in the United States. And this can be a variety of programs. It can be to learn English, it can be to go to your undergraduate degree, a master's degree, a PhD, and a bunch of other courses. If you're already, at this seminar, you've probably looked into a lot what the requirements are, what the paperwork you have to do is to get to the visa stage. You need an I-20, you need acceptance at a university. You're probably, looking into all kinds of different universities, considering what's going to be the best for you financially and practically. And then you get to that visa interview, which is what we're really interested here. There are a lot of moving parts in the visa interview. They're going to ask you for the I-20 first. And when they look at the I-20, they're going to be focusing on a few main sections of that I-20. It's going to be the university you're going to, the major or program that you're going to be doing, the financial sponsorship piece, how long your program is going to take, Those are going to be the main sections that they're focusing on. So you want to be very prepared to talk about those sections, because those are the sections that they usually ask questions about. And when you go to a visa interview, they're going to start with just general questions. Why do you want to study this program? Why did you choose this university? And this is where a lot of people make mistakes from the start. They say things that are not personal and kind of like reciting as if they were reading a Wikipedia page. I chose to study at the University of Texas Arlington because it has a 80-acre green campus and was founded in 1826 by Jeremy Smith. A lot of students, they just go with random facts about the university in response to the question of why are you studying at this university, or why have you chosen this university? The visa officer immediately is turned off by that. They think it's disingenuous. They think the applicant is not being honest and may have other motives that are incompatible with the F1 visa. So when you think about how am I going to answer these questions at the visa interview, you have to start there. How am I going to personalize my answers so that they make sense to an American visa officer? And I say American because this is also somewhat of a cultural bridge. You need to present yourself in a way that an American visa officer is going to find approvable. And so that has a lot to do with the way you express your confidence, your posture. Some people, in some cultures, people don't smile that much, right? It's like not common for you to smile with strangers or in a bureaucratic application process. But the American officer is definitely going to be more open to your application if you look happy to be there, if you look, somewhat friendly. So even those little things, like the, very like cultural aspects of your body language, you want to make sure you're tuning those into what is an American officer going to find acceptable for this visa application. And then when you get to the questions, you want to make sure you're not just giving, like I said, impersonal reciting facts kind of answers, that it's very personal to your own decision-making pattern, and making sure that those decisions, the way you made your decision, that it's going to be acceptable within the US visa framework. So just saying, oh, I chose this university because it was the cheapest, is not a good response. If you say that, they're going to think that you're not solvent. And if they think you're not solvent, they're going to reject your visa. So, you want to think about reasons that you chose the university that they're going to find credible within the framework of non-immigrant intent. We can talk more about that as you guys have questions, but that's kind of a broad introduction. The other thing is make sure your answers are not too short. A lot of people, like the visa officers, say, where are you going to study? And they'll just say, the University of Texas at Arlington. Well, it already says that on your I-20. So if they're asking the question, it's because they want some context. You need to expand a little bit, and within that expansion, along the lines of what I've been saying about, it needs to be personal, it needs to be along the lines of what is going to be approvable. But a lot of people hear that advice and then they say, okay, I can't just give a one-word answer. I'm going to tell the visa officer everything about my life. And that is also a really bad idea. You need to be very concise. So this is why it's important to get ready for your visa interview and to practice, because this is a skill. You need to pitch your case in a very concise, professional way so that the visa officer sees that it's approvable.
Amazing.
That's
Thank
a
you,
basic
Christa.
introduction, but I'd like to probably go through some specific questions so that we can focus more.
Sweet. Thank you very much. No, that's a very good intro there. Just diving into that right away. So I will kind of like take it from right there. Is the student visa or the general visa interview process can be nerve-wracking. And how do you recommend that, I've gotten my admission, I have my I-20, I'm going to the US consulate or the US embassy for my interview. Like, how do you recommend, what are best practices, the things that you recommend start getting ready, right? So for instance, you mentioned earlier just not basically talk about things that are not related to, why you're looking for the visa or the visa category, right? But what are some like best practices even before I show up at the embassy, when I show up at the embassy and before I walk to that window? What are kind of like some best practices of things I should, put together or be looking forward to doing before the interview?
Well, the main thing that I can talk to in response to that question is you need to think about what the visa officer is going to ask you, and you need to be prepared for your responses. If you go in just thinking, oh, I'm going to say, I'm going to respond, I know they're going to ask me some questions and I'm just going to respond in the moment, you probably just failed your visa interview. If that's your approach, you need to really do some research, think about what are they going to be asking you and how can you answer those questions in a way that is going to be approvable. It's just being here on this call obviously is a good first step. There are now a lot of resources online about from former consular officers who do similar work that I do in terms of trying to educate the public about what is actually expected of them at the visa interview. I have a YouTube channel where I share information about the F1 process and other visa classes. And there we'll talk about what are the questions you can expect, how should you be answering them. You can even, if you're really, really nervous and need extra help, you can sign up for a one-on-one consultation. But the most important thing in my mind is to realize that you have to get prepared for your responses. You can't just go in blind and have no idea what questions are going to be asked and how you might frame your responses in the moment. Now, I think that that's a smart thing because as you noted at the beginning of your question, the visa interview is very nerve-wracking for a lot of people, and going in prepared and really thinking about how you're going to respond to questions and what your story is going to be in the visa interview actually helps you be less nervous. If you go in there with no preparation and no thought, that's when you just become like mute and can't even talk because the whole situation overwhelms you so much. Getting prepared with this kind of activity, what we're doing now, all the stuff that's available on YouTube, and even doing a one-on-one consultation, that's all going to help quell your nerves or at least control them and come up with a visa interview that is going to be more likely to be approved than if you didn't prepare at all.
Sweet, thank you. So one of the biggest challenges when I chat with prospective international students or those that are looking to go get US visas in general is those that get denied, they often get denied because of home ties. And I think there's kind of like this, huge mysterious cloud around what constitutes good home ties and what constitute, reasonable home tie. Recently, we had a lady, she's going to, I wish she was, maybe she's on the call today. She she lives in England and she is an international student there. She's got like legal status and whatnot. And she is trying to go to the US for higher education. She has a fully paid, all expense paid scholarship. She's coming for a PhD. But she is basically worried that she's not going to get her visa approved in the UK because she doesn't have home ties in the UK. And she needs to go back to Nigeria to go interview in Nigeria. And we were kind of like brainstorming the idea that, what really constitutes, home ties. You're in the UK legally, you have a legal student status to be in the UK. You're trying to go to the US for, to further your education as a PhD, all expense paid, etc. But she's like just have all of those things going on in her head as to what really constitute home ties. And since she doesn't have family members in the UK, how does she really prove the home tie? So if you could take some time
Okay,
to kind of like
I'll answer
elaborate on
that
that.
generally first, and then
Okay.
maybe as an example, talk about this woman you're mentioning. So
Okay.
home ties, like you said, are this very nebulous concept. It's not fixed, and it depends on what the visa officer thinks. You know, what their training is, what their background is, personally. And there's some general concepts that are applicable across the board, but this is one of the reasons that the US visa interview is so hard, because it's very subjective. And that's why your performance is so important, because your performance and you pointing out strategically, your strengths or ties outside of the United States is really going to make a difference in your interview. So generally, like, what is a visa officer taught about home ties, right? What is their training? Their training is that home ties can be, economic, family, social, and cultural, basically. So in practice, the most important are economic. Because people who are young, looking to go study abroad, looking to travel, when you're young, that's kind of the most disruptive part of your life, right? It's like the time when you would be most likely to immigrate if that were in your plans. And the whole point of the visa process is to the US government wants to ensure that people are not using temporary visas to immigrate permanently to the United States. So the whole concept of home ties is what is going to motivate this person to return to their country or leave the United States after their temporary stay in the US. And so in practice, for young people, that is generally economic, and you want to be focused in a student visa interview. For example, you want to be focused on what is your career path outside of the United States after you're done studying in the US. So let's say you are going to the US to study finance. And they ask you a question at the visa interview. Why do you want to do this? Or, why are you going to study finance? Your answer needs to focus on not just why you like finance, why you want to study that, but how this is going to lead to a career path outside of the United States. And generally that's going to be in your home country, although we'll talk about this woman who's applying as a third country national in England. If you're applying in your home country, which is the most normal situation, you would want to they say, why do you want to do this? Or why do you want to study finance? I want to study finance because it's part of my overall trajectory. And after my studies, I'd like to go back home to start up a fintech company in Nigeria, where there is a big space for that right now, right? So you have to drop in hints in your answers that you intend to use this education to further your career outside the United States. Now, everyone knows that you can apply for a visa today, go study in the US, and your plans can change. Maybe you don't go back to Nigeria to do a startup. You end up working at a bank in England, or you end up getting a banking job in the United States. Whatever your ultimate path is after the visa interview, that's up in the air. But for the purpose of your responses at the visa interview, you want to indicate what you imagine your career path to be outside of the United States, once your student status is up, okay? Without considering, future visas or, anything like that, because all of those are not real. What's real and what's most likely at the point of applying for the student visa is that you're going to have to find a career path outside of the United States. And you need to be able to express what that's going to be and why the studies that you're going to do in the United States make sense as part of your career path. So that's the first part. For a student, you really need to talk about your projected career path outside of the United States to demonstrate that you have ties outside of the United States. For a person who is, when you apply in a country that you're not a citizen of, like this woman who wants to go for a PhD but is living in England, that she is applying as what's called a third country national. That makes your application more complex because as soon as the visa officer sees your passport, they're going to be thinking in their head, why are you here? What do you do in England? They're going to have a series of questions about your case that are going to make it more complex. And the more complex your case is, the more difficult it is. So that person would have to, really be prepared to talk about their current situation in England. One thing I always recommend is if, like, I know in the UK, they have like a digital status verifying system that you can print out. I would clip the verification of their status to their passport and hand that over together to the visa officer so that the visa officer can immediately verify what their status is in the UK. And then you kind of take away one more, there's one less question for the visa officer to ask during that interview. And this person would want to, again, focus on what their career path is outside of the United States. It's clear that they're, on an international trajectory. What do they plan to do with their education once they're finished studying in the United States? That is credibly outside of the United States. A person like that, I would actually really recommend a one-on-one consultation, just because they have, there's a lot of moving parts in their situation, and they would really benefit from practicing more and really understanding the complexity that they're getting into with a third country national application. One thing I can say specifically about England is that there is a large Nigerian expatriate population in England. And so the visa officers there are fairly used to speaking to Nigerian applicants. So it's not actually a terrible place for a Nigerian to apply. Now, I would not recommend a Nigerian apply in Croatia because I don't think that a visa officer has seen a Nigerian in Croatia ever, or very, very unlikely, right? So it also, like, again, it depends on where they apply as a third country national. A Nigerian in England, that's probably okay. A Nigerian in Croatia, I would say go back home. So it's very dependent, like situational dependent, and someone in a situation like that is going to benefit from a deeper consultation.
One-on-one.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. So a lot of international students or people seeking US visa that get rejected often get rejected under the Section 214B, very common. And it's kind of like this thing that most people don't understand what 214B is. When you look it up, it has like a list of a bunch of things that the 214B covers. Could you shed more light on what that really means for people who at one point or the other has received this amazing letter from the consulate or embassy?
Yeah, it's so terrible. It doesn't explain anything really, and it's in the most like confusing language. So you have to realize what the law says. The law that was written, 214B is Immigration and Nationality Act, Section 214B. There's a text associated with that in American law, and it says that every person who applies for a visa is assumed to be an immigrant until they prove otherwise to the satisfaction of the consular officer. So what does that mean in practice? It means you are guilty until you prove yourself innocent in the visa interview. And that's terrible. It sounds terrible. It's not fair, but that's the way it is. And you have, again, a lot of times people are like, oh, the US visa process, it's so unfair. It's so difficult, and there's a lot of things about it that I agree with you on. And that's why I do this education that I do. But you have to take it as it is. You can't just wish it were some other way. This is how it is. The visa officer is suspicious of you. They think you might immigrate to the United States. That's the way they're trained, and that's what the law says. And so you have to take it as it is and do everything in your power to demonstrate in the visa interview that that is not the case, that you're not intending to immigrate to the US. And this is I'm always going to come back to my main point, which is get prepared for the visa interview. Understand what kind of questions they're going to ask you and how you should respond to them in a way that is going to show them that you do not intend to immigrate to the United States.
Thank you. So moving on to the next questions around finances. This is kind of like a two-part question, really. Is the first one is how important are finances? I'm coming to the US for a B1, B2, as a B1, B2, or in an F1, F2 status is, how important are finances? How do I prove, that I have this finances, available to me? Because sometimes, you have all of these documents and you take it to your visa interview and they look at it sometimes they don't look at it. So, it's kind of like you don't know. But are finances important? And,
So what
how
visa
do I
class are
show
we
that?
talking about? Are we
Let's
talking
let's speak let's stick to the most, but let's stick to the F1 F2 visa here.
Okay, so
Yeah.
for the F1 visa, F2 visa, they are definitely going to look at your finances. They are extremely important. The visa officer is required to see some documentation within the visa interview that you're able to afford this. Now, some people say, well, they didn't even look at my documentation. That's because if the visa officer, if you don't get through questions 1 and 2, they're not even gonna look at your finances because they're like, I've already decided they don't qualify without even looking at their finances. So if you get to the financial part, it means that the visa officer is, slowly going towards maybe I'm going to issue this person. Once you get to the finances, and you get past that part, that's when you're on probably a pretty good path to issuance. So let's see. There are a lot of different ways to finance education, right? I've seen a lot of questions here that are about like, what about the Empower loans,
Yep.
or other
That was
loans?
gonna be the second part of the question around, if student loans are a good way to show, that finance.
Okay, so I do not, very direct, I do not suggest or recommend presenting 100% loan. It is going to be very hard to convince the visa officer that you're going to have, US education is very expensive, as we all know. It's going to be hard to convince the visa officer that you're going to have economic opportunities outside of the United States to repay that loan. So either you're going to default on the loan, which isn't a good thing, or you're going to immigrate permanently to the United States in order to be able to pay it back and earn US dollars. So I would say my personal preference when I'm talking to people about how they should set up their finances is that they shouldn't present more than a 50% loan. A loan is not a bad thing, but a 100% loan is a good way for the visa officer to say, yeah, they're probably going to try to stay in the US for the rest of their life to pay this loan back, because it's going to be so hard to pay it back in the country they're from if they leave the US after their studies. And then when you're they'll say, how are you going to pay for this? Right? That's a very common question at the visa interview. There's like a hierarchy of how you want to present this. The first is going to be any personal savings you have, right? I've been working, you're going to a master's degree and you've already been working for a few years and you've managed to save the equivalent of, I don't know, $5,000 or $10,000. I have personal savings that I have been working on for the last several years in order to, fund part of my education. If you have a sponsor, like maybe a parent, an aunt, a friend, someone who, personal savings. Number 2, scholarships. Any scholarship you have received from the university, or from other third parties that are on the I-20, mention those. Scholarships are a very good part of the financial package because they show not only that you want to go to the university, but that the university wants you to go there, or that another party is vetting for you and saying, this is a good student. I want to pay for this person to study somewhere. So formal scholarships really they need to be at the top of your, financial explanation if you have them. So personal savings, scholarship, then talk about your sponsor, if there's a sponsor making up for any of the difference, and then loans. Okay, so you want to leave the loan for the last because it's kind of the least prestigious form of financing. And when you talk about the loan, you want to be very briefly explaining how you intend to pay that back. Maybe I've heard people say like, I inherited some properties. After my education, I'll intend to sell some of them in order to pay the loan back, or my parents will be helping pay back the loan in the long term, right? You want to briefly mention what is your basic plan for paying this back. If it's your own, if you are sure that you're going to be getting a really great promotion or job after your education in the United States, you want to mention that as well. But I really think there's a hierarchy of how you should talk about your finances, and you want to mention them in that order, and also like very professionally, right? Like I'm a man with a plan, or I'm a woman with a plan. Not just like, oh, well, I have these things and we'll see, blah, blah, blah. No, like it's like a strategic presentation of how I'm going to finance this education. So you really want to practice that as well.
Awesome. And kind of like just in addition to that is, which of these do you list on your DS-160, right? Because when you're filling out the DS-160, there's kind of like a lot of the questions around who is paying for your, entity or individual is responsible for your trip, and it doesn't really give you a lot more space, right? So a lot of people actually, just a little bit back, a lot of people believe like, the DS-160 is really where majority of the decisions, kind of like the information that you put on the DS-160 is kind of like where a lot of the decisions are made. So maybe you can tell us if student needs to like pay attention to what information they put on there, and also in the areas of the entity or individual responsible for paying for the trip, if they have like, stack of funding, they have scholarships, they have loans, they have personal money, um, what should they put in there to not, trigger something really?
Okay, the DS-160 is important. I agree with that. And it needs to be honest and it needs to be accurate. But in terms of decision making, that most important is your interview performance. So, definitely take the DS-160 very seriously, but take your interview performance equally as seriously. Because a lot of the decision making, yes, the DS-160 is part of the decision making, but even more important is your interview performance. So within the DS-160, the big things for an F1 student visa that they've, before they've even read the DS-160, they're already going to have looked at your I-20, and a lot of the information is repeated in the I-20 and the DS-160. It's the same, where are you going, what are you going to be studying, that kind of stuff. So in that sense, like I wouldn't be too obsessed about, the DS-160. You want to get it right. You want to make sure it's accurate, but you want to focus more on how you're preparing what you're going to say at the interview. What was the specific question about the DS-160 though? Like the financing?
It is, yeah, the financing part, right? Yeah, who's paying? Does it like if you have like a mix of funding sources, like which one should you focus on putting in there?
The most prestigious. So if you have scholarship. If you have personal or family savings, then whatever's the most prestigious of that hierarchy, I said, because they only allow you to put one. So
yeah,
pick that.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Christa. So for those of you that are just joining, that have joined right after we started, the way we're going to take questions as we kind of like move closer to the Q&A session here is please use the raise your hand button. We're going to go through and take some questions from the chat, and also for those that have raised their hands, we'll probably also bring them on to, ask some questions. We may not, well, not even we probably will not reach every question today, but at the end of the So, yeah, at the end of the session, Krista will drop her contact information. So for those of you that may want to reach her directly, you will be able to reach her. She also has a YouTube channel where you can, go watch some of the things that she's put out. And also you can reach out to our team and we'll be happy to facilitate those conversations. So moving on here is
So a lot of people in the chat are asking if we can talk about the B1, B2 visa. Do we want to talk about
okay.
that
Yeah,
just real
yeah,
quickly?
let's take a minute. Yeah, go
Okay,
ahead.
so we've heavily focused on the F1 because obviously Paul is focused on helping students,
Yeah,
but there
students.
even more common than the F1 visa is the B1, B2, and I understand that some people might want to get some information about that as well. So just generally, everything I've said about interview performance applies here, right? Like you need to be extremely prepared for the kinds of questions they're going to be asking you at the visa interview. You want to be professional and concise and give answers that are going to point to why you are going to leave the United States after your temporary trip. So it, obviously everyone's situation is different. And this is where consultation can really help you because a former visa officer can help you figure out what are the best things in your profile that are going to show the visa officer that you are intending to leave the US after your temporary trip. And you need to, once you've identified those highlights or those strengths, you need to figure out how to drop those points into your answers, no matter what the visa officer asks you. There's, if you go to a B1, B2 visa interview, they are very likely going to ask you, what is the purpose of your trip? Where do you work? Who do you live with? Why do you want to travel to the US? Have you traveled anywhere else, right? There are some standard questions that are, at least a few of those you're likely to get at your interview. You need to very concisely include in your responses information that is going to show the visa officer that you qualify. So if you have a good job, or this one is pretty good, like say you've traveled before internationally and they say, why do you want to go to the United States? Well, I've already traveled to Dubai and South Africa, and I had a really great time on those tourism trips. Now I'd like to do some tourism in the United States, specifically visit New York, right? They didn't ask you, have you ever traveled anywhere before? But you are intentionally dropping that little nugget into your answer, no matter what question they ask you. And this is very much visa interview strategy. And you see that, like I always say, like politicians do this. They decide what they want their audience to know before the interview. And they pivot their responses to provide the information that they want their audience to know. That's how you need to prepare for the B1, B2 interview. You need to decide what you want the visa officer to know about your life and the ties that you have to your home country, and provide that information no matter what question they ask. Because as you do that, the visa officer is going to have in their mind, okay, they're showing me all their ties with these responses. This seems like a good case, and it's very possible that they will lean towards issuance of your case. The other thing is visa officers do a lot of interviews. They're interviewing 100, sometimes more people a day. You have to stand out as a good applicant. Most visa applicants who go to their interview are like, they're like deer in headlights. They're lost. They don't know what they're doing. They give these terrible answers like, why, where are you traveling to in the US? New York. What do you do for a living? Business. What's your business? Motorcycle shop. Okay, how much do you make a month? Wow. Do you employ anyone?
I don't know. Yeah.
The visa officer is forced to fish for information. Do not ever force a visa officer to fish for information and make all these follow-up questions. It is maddening when you have to interview so many people in a day and you have to ask these questions repetitively. So by you just standing out as a prepared applicant who is giving some valuable information in your concise but prepared and thorough answers, they are going to like you more. They're going to be like, oh my God, this person is making my job easier. Okay. So those are two big things about B1, B2. And if there's any more specific questions, we can talk about those.
Thank you very much. And then in addition to that, we know we've talked about the B1, B2, the F1, F2. How about the J visa? It's kind of like the same principles apply. I'm assuming.
Well, the J visa can be used for so many things. You can be, you can go work at a ski resort for a summer. You can go work at a beach for a summer. You can go be a doctor. You can go be an au pair. You can do research at a university. So it's really hard to answer that question because it really depends what the person is going to be doing on that visa. The F1 is easier to talk about more generally because everyone's going to study if you get an F1. But if you get a J1, it's like you could be doing temporary work, you could be researching, you could be even doing there are programs where it's a study. So it really depends. And I would want to talk more specifically about actually what they're doing on the visa in order to give more concrete advice. But in general, the principles I'm talking about apply, right? Being prepared, understanding what they're going to ask you, figuring out what you want to say at your interview, and what you want the visa officer to know about your strong ties before you go in, and making sure that information is included in your responses.
Okay. Thank you very much for those responses. So if you have asked the questions around the J1, I think it would be a good idea for you to book, a session or reach out to Christa and her team so they can better understand your situation and advise you appropriately. So moving on, people just wonder, I've gone for a visa interview. It was not the expected outcome. Um, you know, what should I do? How long should I wait to reapply? Should I even worry about reapplying? And if I do reapply, how many times is too much? We've seen people say, "This is my fourth time trying," and I'm like, "Yeah, if you've been denied for four times, I probably just wait for maybe the US is not necessarily where you should be looking at going to for whatever reason." So I think you know, it would, I think it would be nice to, just have some chat around that.
Okay, so I have definitely some general tips about that. Just one second. I'm putting my email address in the chat in case anyone wants to directly contact
Reach
me.
out, yeah.
Okay, so reapplying. First of all, the visa interview is super fast and they are making very snap judgments on you. If you went super unprepared and you think that's one of the main reasons that you were denied, and you truly think you qualify for the visa, I think it's a good idea to reapply. With preparation, do not go into a second or third or fourth interview without really getting prepared, doing research about the questions and how you're going to reply to them. Now, one thing that people often get asked at a reapplication is, why are you here again? Or what has changed in your situation? It's very common, I would say, in 90% of cases where you're reapplying for the visa, they're going to ask you that question. And a lot of people give really terrible answers to that question. They say, nothing has changed, or they'll say, I just want a US visa, I really want to go to the US, or they'll say, I have literally heard someone say, I've prayed more. That is not a significant change in your case. That is going to get you a US visa. So I have a pretty good formula for what you should do in that situation. The goal of that question, the goal of your response to that question, is to get the visa officer serious about reconsidering your case, because they're seeing in their system that, okay, your case has already been denied before. They may look at the case notes of what the officer said about your denial. And now they have this person in front of them. Honestly, the easiest thing for them to do is just re-deny you, because there's already a history in your case that says that, in your file that says that you've been denied before, and that's kind of the easiest thing for them to do. So you've got to convince them why they need to look at this case again, that there might have been an error, there might have been a misunderstanding, that you didn't have a chance to show your qualifications. So what I always suggest doing is a 3-part response. I believe there was a misunderstanding. Present some kind of strength or highlight about your case, right? Say you were denied on, I don't know, financing for your education. I believe there was a misunderstanding about my financing for my degree. Today, I've brought additional documents to show that I have significant personal savings as well as a scholarship. Please reconsider my case. The third part is to actually give a petition to reconsider the case. Very short. All of this is short. I'm not saying you need to, expand 5 paragraphs. It's 1 or 2 sentences, but it has to be extremely strategic and impactful. And this 3-part petition to reconsider the case is actually going to get the visa officer to say, okay, I should look at this again, instead of just like, oh, this is an easy denial. They've already been denied. And I think that is the main reason that people who are going back and back and back and back is because they don't change their strategy. They don't understand that they have to get the visa officer to be actually interested in looking at their case again, and to do it in a way that's going to convince them to say, okay, at least I should reconsider this. Now, once you've got the visa officer to say, okay, I'm going to look at this again, and they start asking you, the general questions about your purpose of travel, what you're going to be doing, all of that. Again, going back to my main point, be prepared this time. Don't just go in there like, not talking about your intentions to return to your home country. A lot of people, even at the B1, B2 interview, they'll say, the question, why do you want to, now I'm going to reconsider, the visa officer is ready to reconsider your case after you give this petition. And they say, okay, why do you want to go to the US? Well, I have some really important business meetings. I'm going to be in New York and blah, 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 blah. And all they focus on is their trip to the US. Your trip to the US is not the most important part of this response. The most important part of your response is why you're going to leave the United States. So I need to go to New York for a brief business trip. There's going to be a conference on my sector about whatever. And I only have been authorized 4 travel days by my company. I will be returning home after that, right? Always make sure that you are giving the visa officer some leverage on what is your plan to leave the United States.
Awesome. Thank you very much for that. And I think we're kind of like getting to the end of the general questions here, so we can kind of like take some of the people that have their hands raised. I think lastly,
I want to mention that we're coming up on an hour. I only have about 5 or 10 more minutes, so let's go
okay.
fast.
Then we should dive into just take a couple questions from those that have their hands raised. So I think Hassan will ask Hassan to unmute and ask any question that he may.
Can't hear you at all.
Not yet.
No, you're completely
No.
muffled.
Okay, I think we'll move on. You can drop your questions if you have any. Let's move on to Tajuddin. Please, you can unmute and ask your question.
Nope.
Okay. We'll move on to the next person. Emmanuel. Yeah.
Okay, can you hear me, please?
Now I can hear you.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, thank you so much for the insightful session. And my question goes to Christy. We applied for a B1, B2, and for some reasons, we had to fill the DS-160 twice, but we have the copies of both. Is that going to be a problem for us?
No. Why did you fill it out twice? Because there was a mistake on the first, or?
Yeah, there was a little mistake, and the one of my staff got married, and we saw that that's an advantage. And they also traveled, had some travel experience, and we wanted to add all of that.
Okay, so when you have a new DS-160, you need, and the reasons that you have a new one are good. I mean, they're legitimate. You would want to contact the help desk at the consulate where you're applying. That's usually, the email for that is usually available in the scheduling platform, like on the About Us or contact page. And you want to just send a quick email with your case information saying we had to fill out a new DS-160 because of material changes in the person's situation. Please update the DS-160 number in this case. Now, the annoying thing is they won't always actually do it. So you need to bring a copy of the old DS-160 confirmation page and the new DS-160 confirmation page to the email, to the interview, as well as a printout of the email you sent asking the help desk to update your DS-160 number. As soon as you get to the embassy or consulate, not to the visa interview window when you're talking to the American consular officer, but rather the local staff who's helping, get everyone through the process. As soon as you get there and you see a local staff person, say, we have a new DS-160 on this case. I want to make sure that's what's in the case file when they get to the interview. So they will look in the system to make sure that the correct DS-160 is there.
Okay.
But it's very important to do that before you get to the visa interview, because if the help desk didn't do their job and you get to the interview, you get all the way to the interview and you say, oh, I have a new DS-160, the visa officer is going to be annoyed. It makes them do an extra step. So make sure that the extra step, you're doing that before you get to the visa interview.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thanks. That's all.
All right, we'll move on. Musa, I think you're up next.
All right, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Christy. My question goes thus: like, based on your experience with visa application process, like, I would like to seek your advice because I've been to the embassy more than 3 times, same transcript where I was.
Musa, I can't understand you. Put your mouth closer to the microphone.
Probably maybe because of that. Can you hear me now?
No, it's like it sounds very far away.
Yeah, Musa, if you can drop your question or try to send an email, then we'll just move on to the next person in the line here. Hi, Alfred, if you want to jump on.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Please go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I want to please ask a question because he said that when we are funding, we should not actually bring the loan down at the front. For someone who have a scholarship and also have some savings, but the scholarship and the savings will not take care of all the living expenses and the tuition, and you have a loan approved. Now, how do you go about it in terms of presenting a fact to them that you have a scholarship and you have a personal savings, but or you also got a student loan to cover up, so that it will be able to convince them that you are not migrating, you are not just going there to stay after your studies. So that's my question.
Okay, so when you have a variety of funding sources, like I said, you should talk about them in the hierarchy that I mentioned: scholarship, personal savings, sponsorship, loan. Make the loan for the last. It sounds like the loan is not the only source of funding, so that's very good in your case. And when you get to talking about the loan, you want to make sure that you're briefly mentioning what's your plan to pay it back. Visa officers understand that education in the United States is expensive, and that a loan can sometimes make sense for a person. But it sounds like in your situation, you're in a good position because it's not your entire source of funding, that's when it's problematic. I think, in your case, what you would want to do is follow the advice that I've talked about here in terms of how you talk about it and the order you talk about your funding in, and make sure the rest of your interview is very tight, very professional, and you are impressing the visa officer with the impression that you're a guy with a plan, you know what you're doing, and you have intentions to work outside of the United States once your education is complete.
And that wraps it up. We want to be respectful of Christa's time. I am also dropping some information about her email and our email here in the chat. So if you have any questions, please, you can reach out to Christa, and I think she will be able to help you figure out how to get time in with her or her team. And you can also reach out to us, reach out to NS. In case you need help facilitating some of these things, we'll be more than very happy. In closing, Christa, do you have any word of advice or word of wisdom for our listeners, and also how they can reach out to you?
Yeah, I did my contact info message again in the chat. Make sure you look at that, both the YouTube channel where I post all kinds of very free information. I don't hold anything back about the visa interview process, so you can definitely count on getting a lot of good information there at the Visa View. And then also my email address in case you have any kind of personal questions that you don't want to post on a public forum in YouTube, or you want to do more one-on-one consultating. Well, the US visa process is confusing. It's difficult. It takes, a lot of planning, and I would say a little bit of bravery to go through it. So I really wish you guys all the best. And I think that if you're really serious about it and you really take this advice seriously, you're going to have a lot better chance. I cannot guarantee that you're going to be issued a visa. No one can guarantee that until you get to your visa interview. But I can guarantee you that following this advice and being more prepared and really taking it upon yourself to show the visa officer why you're qualified with the strategy that I've been talking about is going to increase your chances of issuance. So I really hope that your processes go well. I know that there's a lot of opportunity in the US, and it would change many people's lives to do the plans that you're planning to do. So I really hope it works out for you, and I'm on your side. I'm on your team. I'm rooting for you.
Thank you very much, Christa. It's been nice having you, and do enjoy the rest of your day.
Wait, Paul, where are you going to be putting the recording?
I think the recording after this, we'll put it out. We'll send it out. It'll probably be YouTube, and then send the link out to the people who are in attendance. We'll also probably tag you and share with you as well, so you can share with your
Yeah, I saw
listeners.
some questions in the comments as well, so that's great
Yeah.
for anyone who wants to share it with friends who couldn't come, and also let them know about Paul's channel and my own channel, where we're always trying to give out good visa advice.
We'll tag that. Thank you very much. It's been nice chatting with you.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye. Bye, everybody.